as a leader because you can't make decisions. Your doctor makes decisions based on your numbers.
Yes.
And you, as the leader of your church, organization, whatever, you are making decisions based upon the data that you have. And numbers tell you everything. So if anybody tells you that numbers don't matter, they're either one, not in charge, two, don't care, or three, not paying attention to the health of their church. Because welcome to the Todd Barn Leadership Podcast. Like and subscribe wherever you listen to this content and share it with a friend.
Okay, Pastor Todd, we are back this week and let's talk about unpopular decisions.
Okay.
Everyone's favorite topic.
Yeah.
But I think there is a lot of misunderstanding for leaders and people that are at the other side of unpopular decisions. And today I'd like to walk them through it and break it apart and help people understand a little bit more about what unpopular decisions are, why they're necessary, and how they can be useful.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, as a leader, what you have to learn to become comfortable with is you have to become comfortable with making unpopular decisions. You know, I could think of several decisions that I made through my life, but you know, there's different levels of unpopular decisions. So you have unpopular decisions with the staff as a whole. You have unpopular decisions with the church as a whole. You have unpopular decisions, you know, with your staff personally that they don't like about you or what you've done and all those things. And so as a leader, you know, one of my biggest downfalls is I actually want people to like me. I don't know if that's a character flaw or whatnot, but I really want people to like me. And so when I make decisions that I know people aren't going to like, it's very stressful to me. But I know for the overall health of the organization, I have to make decisions that are unpopular because sometimes what the masses want is not what is best for the church and the organization as a whole.
So it sounds like the biggest focus of an unpopular decision is going to be the outcome.
Yeah.
What is the outcome and what is the purpose of the outcome? So how do you navigate that? How do you communicate that and bring the people that you lead, bring your staff on board when you have to help manage when you make an unpopular decision? Because there's always a ripple after an unpopular decision.
Well, with your leadership, you have to, you know, really gone are the days where you can just say, I'm the pastor. I'm going to make this decision. This is the way it is. I mean, you can't really do that anymore. You can more do that with the church as a whole, but with your leadership, you have to kind of help them understand your thought process. And there's a lot of factors that go into it. You know, the church has resources. We have resources at our disposal, and obviously, the first resource we think about is the budget, the money. But really, one of the most valuable resources that you have is the time of the people that you have been entrusted with. Because especially if you have some very loyal people, they will sacrifice their own well-being to push forward the mission of the church.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that really came into fold for me the last time that we did a building project. So we were at 3 services. So if you're listening to this and you're at one service and you're like, I need more room, the cheapest way to have more room in the church is multiple services. And so when budgets
all staff members just held their breath.
Yeah.
Wait till he gets to the end. Don't stop listening yet.
Yeah. And so that's the cheapest way to do it. But one of the most expensive ways to do it as far as manpower goes is multiple services. Right. And so if you have a plethora of manpower and low budget, that's an easy way to do it. And so for us, before our last building project, before the last time that we expanded our sanctuary, we were at 3 services. And I just felt the Lord say, you know, very clearly that you've got to do something because long term, 3 services is just not going to work.
We were dying.
Yeah. Well, and it's it's just where we are.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Where we were, because our church at the time, our building, our sanctuary could only seat the seating capacity was about 180. So really, the law is they say only about 80%. You can only have 70 to 80% full before people feel like the sanctuary is full, and they won't come back. So for us, that was about 120 in the sanctuary, and with kids total, that got, once we got about 150, it started to get a little crazy in each service. And so our church was sitting at about 300, but that's really small to go to multiple services, because essentially you're asking. And so for us, 3 services at the size we were at was just not sustainable for a long period of time. And so I just asked the Lord, I just need you to send me I just need you to send me a solution. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more on another episode, when we talk about building projects and different things like this. But God just kind of sent us the right person at the right time, and Mark Chapman and his group with North Texas, and they helped us get to where we are. And now we're at 2 services. And here's the thing: one day we will have to go back to 3 services. But our church will be much larger, and our volunteer pool will be much larger at that point. So it won't be as big of a headache as it was when we were small. And here's the thing: nobody in your leadership wants to go to church more than once. But what you have to do is you have to help them understand, hey, this is for kingdom advancement.
Right.
This isn't about you. This isn't about what you want. This isn't about that. It's about kingdom advancement. And I've been working with a few churches. One church in particular went down for a staff intensive with them, and they're staring down. They had standing room only at Easter for one service, which is great.
Yes.
But they were down in their attendance the few weeks after. And I said, well, you know why that is? Like, no,
there wasn't any room.
We don't get it. You weren't any room. Everybody, I said, if you go into a restaurant and it's packed, they're not going to want to come back.
Yes.
And I could just feel in the room. I mean, when I said 2 services, they were like, I hate this guy. I can't wait to get him out of this room, back to his church, and he can leave us alone. But I just walked him through.
Yes.
I walked him through the processes, and I walked him through, and I helped him understand, and I coached him. And I said, look at all the people. I think we devised that they're a rural church, but we devised that in their reach, there's about 19,000 people that are unchurched. And I said, I know you guys don't want to see those 19,000 people go to hell, which of course they were like, no. And, and we just talked him through it. And I said, I had him give me a pros and a cons list. And of course, like good church folks, their cons list was larger than their pros list. And when I just walked him through each con, and I said, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered this? And about after 2 hours of me just investing and just challenging them, they were excited about going to 2 services. And sometimes that's what you have to do as a leader. You know the decision needs to be made. You know that you have to do it.
And now we have to get them there.
And now you have to get them on board. And you have to understand the sheep get on board slower than you do.
Yes.
Because this is not their life. This is not their world. This is not all they think about. When they get up in the morning, they're thinking about something else. They're not thinking about the church. When you get up in the morning, that's all you're thinking about is church.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not doing a doom scroll, that's for sure. I head right to base camp at Church Center. So it sounds like you just took us somewhere, and it was easy for me to pick up, and I want to make sure anyone listening in doesn't miss it. I tracked what you were saying, obviously working with you. Communication is very important here. You want to be, we don't want to justify or explain away as a leader why we're making an unpopular decision, because that will impact people getting on board with it. But what kind of communication do we need to have here? You used words like pouring into them. It sounds like you spent a lot of time in this example helping them see the vision and helping them see the why. But I would be willing to bet you also help them remember their why, for them to be more moldable and more on board with the unpopular decision. So how do you do that without over explaining as a leader why you're making all these decisions.
Well, and you say the word over explaining, you're going to feel like that you're over
Oh, yeah,
explaining.
you have to say it over and over.
You're going to, once you get tired of saying it,
Say it 3 more times.
they're just about now starting to get
Yes.
it. But you have to help them see the end goal. People are more than willing to go along with you on just about anything if they know the end goal. With the example I made with this other church, and even our church is what is the end goal? The end goal is a larger church. And, with this church, I said, do you want your church to grow? Well, yes. Well, you're out of room. So, and in this particular example, their governance structure doesn't allow them to take on debt as a church, which that's their model and that's okay. I said, how long would it take you to raise money and build a new building? I said 3, 4, 5 years. They said probably. I said, okay, well then the problem is,
How do we get there?
the problem is you're going to stop growing in that amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
I said growth is like a wave. If you've ever been surfing, and if you're watching online, I'm using my hands to illustrate this, but I'll do my best to illustrate it with my words as well. But in case you're listening, if you've ever been surfing or watched surfing, I've only ever watched surfing. I've never been surfing because I live in the middle of Texas. But a wave starts to come, and what you have to do is you have to catch the wave before it crests and ride it in. And growth is the same way. If you don't catch the wave will pass you by and crest, and you have to wait for the momentum of the next wave to come. And sometimes that takes a lot longer than what you want it to do. And so, that's in church leadership, in church growth, in church, and all these things. We have to catch the momentum while it's there. And if we don't catch it, it may never come back. And church and lifetime and all these things, we don't have momentum and things coming as quickly and as fast as we want them to.
With your wave illustration, what stands out to me is that as a leader, you almost need to be positioned and ready to make the unpopular decision. You need to know when it is time, because I would say that as a leader, you're always observing things that the people that you're leading aren't. So when you see that coming, whether it is trouble, growth, a shift needs change, maybe you've plateaued in production or growth, when those things are needed, you almost know that a decision is coming, because it could mean change. It could mean more work. It could mean a shift that maybe, like say in the church world, 3 services, that's an unpopular decision across the board.
Sure. So
when you use the analogy of the wave, it's almost like you were anticipating what needed to happen.
Yeah. So as a leader, our job is to anticipate what is coming. And so my staff is always annoyed with me because I'm paying attention to numbers. And that's and here's the thing. Numbers as a leader tell us everything. So for instance, when you go to the doctor, what's the first thing that your doctor does when you walk in? April, what's the first thing your doctor does? It's what we all want.
Puts me in a bad mood and takes my weight. Asks me to go on the scale.
Yeah. He takes
rude.
He sees how much you weigh, because that matters for dosages and all that. Yeah. It matters if you've gained a bunch of weight, lost a bunch of weight. That's all indicators of thing. Then you sit down, put a blood pressure cuff on you. They see what's your blood pressure at? Where are you at?
More data.
Yeah. And then they take your pulse rate. That number tells you stuff. Then they take your blood. All those numbers tell you stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's all important, because those numbers give him a picture of your health. In the same way, all the numbers you pay attention to in church gives you a picture of your health. Mm-hmm. So I pay attention to our attendance. I look at the attendance last year. How much has it grown? How much has it gone down? Because it helps me anticipate, am I expecting a lot of people on these days? I pay attention to the numbers in our low Sundays. So I don't always preach when I anticipate there being a low day. I don't always preach. I give the staff an opportunity to preach on the lower days. Why? Because it's less pressure on the lower days. If you're walking up there to preach as a staff pastor and I whisper in your ear, hey, don't screw up, today's the biggest day we've ever had, that's a whole lot of pressure, right? And so you don't want to do that to them.
Yes.
And obviously, you're the pastor. You want to be up there on the big days because that's, that you are the leader of the church. They want to see you. And so these are all things that you have to take to understand and take into account and know as a leader, because you can't make decisions. Your doctor makes decisions based on your numbers.
Yes.
And you, as the leader of your church, organization, whatever, you are making decisions based upon the data that you have. And numbers tell you everything. So if anybody tells you that numbers don't matter, they're either one, not in charge, two, don't care, or three, not paying attention to the health of their church. Because if your doctor ever told you that your weight and your blood pressure don't matter, it's time to get a new doctor.
Yes, right.
Because they do matter.
Yes. And your numbers are indications of not just the here and now, but what could be a future.
Sure.
What could arise in the future. And the reason I'm drawing you into the communication piece is because you already let us know that you are, you want everyone to like you.
Yeah.
Whereas I, being the
Fatal
oldest
flaw.
child, I want everyone to be pleased.
Right.
And so where I struggle as a leader is sometimes while we do need to repeat ourselves a lot, I'll over explain, or I will people please a little bit in my communication to help sell the idea.
Yeah.
And so while I was doing some reading, there are some things which I think you already do. And I want you to share with everyone what kind of verbiage, what kind of communication should we be giving to our team? Because things like transparency and letting them see the future are leadership words over getting them to be on board and agree with the decision you're making. So what is the difference?
I just think you have to be honest with your people and just give them, I don't always think over-explaining is bad. You can over-explain without repeating yourself. I mean, obviously, your not all of your leadership team is going to care about growth trends and percentage in small groups versus percentage in this and that. You should have a certain percentage in your youth group, certain percentage in your kids, all those things. Not all of your volunteer, leaders are going to care about that, but you just got to be honest with them and just say, listen, guys, our church is not going to grow unless we do this. Now, what you have to understand is some people are just fine with your church the size that it is. And most people want the church to stay the same size that it was when they get there.
Yeah.
And they oftentimes will always treat the church at the size it was when they got there. It's not fun, not fair, is what it is. It's something to consider as you grow, is that some of your leaders that came on at a lower level, sometimes they can't make the jump to go with you as the organization grows. And that's, unfortunately, that's one unpopular decision I've had to make over times, is we had to let leaders and staff go that couldn't make the jump or were unwilling to make the jump to go with us and grow themselves to a point that they needed to be. It's unfortunate. It's not fun. You hate to see people go. But one day I'm going to have to, what I tell my church is I'm much scareder of the report I have to give to the Lord when I get to heaven than
yes, you do say that.
Of you guys being mad at me.
Yeah.
Because I know you're going to be mad at me, but I'm much more scared to tell Jesus that I didn't do enough for his church.
Do you think it's important to acknowledge the resistance out loud?
Yeah.
To the group as a whole, because we know, right, where the conversations are happening, which can, done in a healthy, right way, can be very productive for a team. But when you have that resistance, whatever it is, what do we as leaders need to be doing?
Well, it's always good to address the resistance because
should we expect it?
Oh yeah, always expect resistance. Don't think you're ever going to make a decision.
I feel like we should be concerned if there's not resistance.
I mean, not always.
No?
I mean, sometimes your team's so unified that everybody just sees it. And there's times that happens. It's not always. There's been decisions that I've made that the whole church was like, I mean, the church didn't really push back at me when I said, hey, let's build a bigger sanctuary. And I mean, the only concern was the debt load.
Yeah.
I was concerned with that. So
Yes.
I understood
Yes.
that.
Yes. Valid concern.
Yeah. And so you're not always going to, but you have to address, I don't want to say the negative Nancy's because, you have optimists and pessimists and, those
And
are
they
all
are very all important.
sure. But they had the guts to raise it, but you can guarantee 10% of the people thought it. They just didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And so by addressing that, you're minimizing the gossip that will happen later.
And I feel like it builds confidence when you just address
Sure.
it, because like you said, one person may have the courage to bring it up, but not have the skill set
Sure.
to offer the solution. But there's about 15 other people going, mm-hmm. So if you address it, I feel it makes me feel a little bit more confident because I can see them kind of take a breath when I acknowledge it.
Sure. Well, and one of the unpopular decisions I made with our recent church build is we put a bathroom and a shower backstage, and I had a ton of questions about that, and I addressed it when we had a meeting to talk about it with the whole church. I addressed it and I said, I know that a lot of you are thinking, why are you putting in a bathroom or why are you putting in a shower? I said, I know you're thinking it, and I'd love to address it with you. I said, it's very simple. One of two things, you have the worship team, they need a place to go to the bathroom and not have to walk all the way to the front. Most people don't think through that. If they have to go to the bathroom right before they go on stage, right now they have to walk all the way to the lobby and all the way back to the stage to do it. Now there's a stage backstage or a bathroom backstage that they can go to. I said, and also the reason we're putting in a shower is many of our staff are up here working and then they have to look presentable at church events. And some of them live at a decent distance. And so not having to go all the way home to shower and coming all the way home, all the way back is a benefit. I said, and also many of you don't know, you cannot be a Red Cross disaster shelter without a shower. So now we have a shower and it makes us a Red Cross disaster. And once I said that,
Well, because most of us,
chatter.
when we had that ice storm in 2021, there were almost the whole church. We all needed somewhere to go. And that was a conversation. But see, they don't know that. And so you get resistance sometimes. And most people don't stop to ask, why do I have the resistance to it? And what questions should I be asking?
Sure.
So I like to use that moment whenever I have to make an unpopular decision or whenever I have to talk about the hard thing. I like to rope in the future a lot to shift the focus so that you can see the uncomfortable now and the annoyance, being mad, irritated, that I'm not happy about this. It's almost like I feel like if I can shift my team to where is this going to take us and look how much better this is going to be. Same thing like the 3 services. If we just pull down and do it now and the church grows, our building is going to grow.
Sure.
Well, so talking about the future to me seems really important. Do you feel like roping that in your vision in the future and kind of using that time to lead them out of the resistance, is that helpful at all?
It helps for some people. And like I said, some people don't care. Some people don't care about the future. Some people don't want the church to grow. You also have to talk about, volunteers, how much volunteers 3 services is required, budget, how much more of a budget strain is this on the church than other things. Some people care about money. Some people care about time, but you have to find what you have to find in the audience that you're talking to is who and how will they be affected by what you're about to do? And you have to address what will make them uncomfortable and show them how their life is going to be easier because of this. Or the kingdom is going to be advanced because ultimately their life is not always easier once you do something.
Right.
And that's what they're upset about. But if you can show them what they will be doing for the Lord, they're more likely to listen to that than, hey, I know your schedule is already so busy. I need you to do this as well.
Right.
And that's where most people are. They're overstressed, overworked, and you're asking them to do more. But you've got to set their perspective what they should be concerned about. And ultimately, most of our people love the Lord enough that if once you bring the kingdom perspective in, they understand that, they appreciate that, and they will press into that a little
Okay.
more.
So let me take you a little bit further. You've talked a lot about church growth, church business. It's been a very blessed and busy few years over here at Hope Church. Um, what about those unpopular decisions as a pastor?
Like which ones? All of them? uh, you know, sometimes you get stuck in a rock and a hard place. Somebody wants to use the church this day, and there's a church event, or there's a disagreement between people. I always try to seek the Lord and just make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times that I've had to make the right decision and it cost somebody else what they wanted.
Yeah.
And I said, and I just level with them. Sorry. I know this sucks. I know you're frustrated with me. I know you're displeased with a decision that I have to make, but it's the right one, and I feel like it's the right one. And you may know none of that. You may not know that now, but I hope you will in the future.
Yeah.
And if you've always just been honest and your character is always shown with your people, that's what you can do. I have the blessing of tenure as a senior pastor. I've been a senior pastor now 13 years. And so I have a little bit of experience on my side. But when I was less experienced, people were, not as willing to give me that latitude. Now, thankfully, my success and accomplishments with the Lord's help obviously gives me a little bit more latitude in things that I say. And so people understand that, they may not agree with me, but I've got some skins on the wall, so to speak. And it's not always fun. It's not always easy. You're not always going to be popular. But you have to seek the Lord and make the right decision, because ultimately you have to live with the decisions.
So the relationship is important.
It is. But people also have to know that they may not like the decisions that you make, but they need to feel that you have their best interest at heart. Because people are okay not getting their way if they think that you actually care about them.
Yes.
And I may not always make the right decisions, but one thing that will never be said of me is that I don't care. I care. Probably, unfortunately, I care too much. I probably would be a better leader and can make better decisions if I didn't care so much. But part of what makes me the leader that I am is I do care so much. And so it's kind of a two-edged sword. People love me because I care so much, but it would be a whole lot easier for me personally if I didn't care so much.
Right. Right.
And so, but if people know that you care, they'll give you that latitude, especially if you're making that unpopular decision.
So you saying that you care too much brings me into something else. I came across a lot of literature, because Google always kind of lets you know what other people are asking, which
Right.
I like to go down that rabbit hole at night sometimes, seeing what other people have asked and how the answers kind of connect. And I saw a lot of material on how to stop obsessing over unpopular decisions, how to stop making bad unpopular decisions. So it sounds like the world as a whole is already asking that question.
Yeah.
I've made the decision. I've done all the things, I've had all the conversations, and now I need to move on. And as a leader
Yeah.
of a church this size, and your staff is the largest it's ever been. We
Right.
are very, very, very busy, and lots of connection within our staff.
Sure.
So the shift has to happen, which you have to lead the way as the person who made the decision. How do you pivot yourself and those with you? We've made the decision. We've had all the hard things, and now it's time to move on. It's time to turn the corner. What are some things that you do that you can share with us once you've made an unpopular decision or a difficult decision, and now it's time for everybody to realign and get back to work? What are some things that
Well,
that are helpful.
some of the things that have helped me is just, making policies, hey, this is how we're going to do stuff. And when this happens, this is how we're going to handle it. So,
We
you
walked through it, and so now we have
yeah, I mean,
instructions for next time. That's
you've
good.
already made the decision. I mean, the decision's already been made, and you only have to make the decision once. And so when this happens, things like usage of the building, we've put some parameters on that. So I'm now not having to tell everybody, no, you can't have your little kid's birthday party on a Sunday morning during church.
Yeah.
We've put those
It just
policies
makes
in
it easier.
place. Yeah, and so a lot of times, making policies and making things, especially as your organization grows, that you make the decision once and you take that off of yourself.
Yes.
That helps so
Automation.
much. And also empowering the leaders around you to make decisions.
Yeah.
Part of what I've had to do as a leader is, now that our staff is the largest it's ever been, is I have to give them a certain level that they can make their own decisions. Now, there are times that we have to go back and go, I wouldn't really have
Yeah.
made that
Yeah.
decision. But now
we have
I'm
to
not
learn.
having to say yes or no to everything in
Which
the
is
church.
exhausting.
Yeah. And so now we have a staff, and I've given them guardrails to run in.
Yeah.
Do they make mistakes? Yes. Will they make mistakes? Yes.
Yes.
But 9 times out of 10, they're going to make the right decision. And even on that 10th time, sometimes that may not be the decision that you would have exactly made, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You coach them up a little bit and they make a different decision, next time. For us, finances is a big decision maker. Yes
Yeah.
or no. We've put parameters in place with that. Our staff has credit cards, but they have limits on them and they have to ask for more for those limits. And that takes a lot of the decision making off of me. They have budgets and they can spend within their budget. And once their budget is out, sorry about your bad luck. They set it. They agree to it. And so if they don't
And
live
we're
up to it,
yeah.
I'm not really the bad guy. Now, most of the time, and don't take this to the bank, all the staff that is listening, most of the time we'll give them a little bit more if it's there, but if it's not there, we can't give them any more. But it's just a guardrail to run to, and it just makes it a whole lot easier. So I would really say,
well, and
putting
it probably
systems in place.
those kind of things, it lessens your unpopular decisions. It lessens unnecessary friction because the parameters are in place.
Yeah.
Everyone knows the operating procedures. Everyone has the same expectation, same guidelines, and the leader is not exhausted. It's almost to me, in those that part of your leadership, you can really get burned out very quickly, almost like a parent, because it's constantly yes and no. You're constantly having to make judgment calls and answer questions, and then you start making decisions that they don't agree with any of them.
And it's decision fatigue.
Yes, it's exhausting.
Steve Jobs, late in his life, when Apple was at its highest, Steve Jobs would wear the same thing every day. He just bought the same of every clothes, shoes, pants, all that, underwear, socks, all that, so that he woke up and put on the same thing every day. And he did that because it was one less decision he had to make. And he had more mental power available. So I would say to you as leaders, whatever systems you can put in place to save some decision power for something else, you will make decisions better, because decision fatigue is the thing.
And you will make some unpopular decisions you don't want to make.
Right. Just because you're fed up. And
they're bad decisions. They're not actually unpopular decisions.
Right. Well, and you're just fed up and you don't want to make a decision anymore. And so you just shoot from the hip and you don't think about it. And then you take everybody.
Start giving that yes and that toddler yes and that toddler no, which Justin and I know all too well is very dangerous.
Giving your kids Oreos for breakfast because you're just tired of all the questions, and it works into and the problem is with your people, when you let somebody get away with something and you don't let somebody else get away from something, then hard feelings get into play, resentment,
and it breaks down the trust. It breaks down your trust and the competency that they think that you have. So leave us with this.
Okay.
What is a way that we can equip ourselves as leaders to be prepared to make the unpopular decisions and execute them in a necessary amount of time? That to me speaks confidence. You need to be confident in being able. So what are some things that you do, or some advice you have for us to be better equipped at making these decisions confidently?
You got to have your pulse. You got to have the pulse of the organization. back to the numbers. I know I'm going to keep going back to this doctor illustration, but the reason the doctor can make an educated decision on you is he or she knows your numbers and can look at your history and
Yes.
know what's going on in your body. And so if you don't know what's happening in your organization, you need to get a handle on the numbers real
You've got to know
quick.
the data.
Yeah. And then sometimes it's okay to ask people to give you time to make a decision. Because many people, when they ask you for a decision, they want your decision now. And you shouldn't be put on the spot. You're a human. You need time to think about it. You need time to process. And so I have learned that sometimes asking people to give me 24 hours, can I get back to you in the morning? Can I get back to you? And also people ask me for things on Sunday, and I've started putting the ball in their court. They said, well, Pastor, I want to meet with you. And I used to feel the weight of having to schedule this meeting.
Oh, yes.
And I just said, you know what? Here's my cell phone number. You text me, not today. Today's not a good day. Text me at some point this week. I'll send you a way, to get it scheduled, and we'll get it. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, they never text me.
Right.
Because it's not that important to them.
Right.
And I've found that if I can put it on them and on their shoulders in any way to do that, and that's not to say I don't want to meet with them. I will meet with anybody at any time. Sunday's just not the day I can nail that
I don't
down.
remember anything anyone tells me on a Sunday,
Right.
including my family.
Right. Sunday's
Like,
just
do
not the day.
don't tell
Yeah.
me any relevant information, unless it's a worship
Well,
song.
yeah, and even like say I'm preaching at youth that night. I'm in preacher mode. I'm not
Yes,
in. I'm
my
not
focus
in.
is somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm in ministry mode. I'm not in organization mode, and that's what I tell our staff. Let me be a preacher on Sunday. Let me be the CEO on Monday.
Yes, that's good.
And so and sometimes you've got to communicate that to your staff
Well,
and
it
your
took
leaders.
us a long time to get there too.
Right.
For anybody listening in, there's a good 4 years of solid teamwork built into. He is the pastor on Sunday. We all are. We're all pastoring on
and
Sunday.
I preach to them, do your best not to work on Sunday. And
Yeah.
the reason I say that is because we work on Monday through Thursday, because Sundays can't be our best work because we're busy. We're in ministry mode.
Yes.
And we should be people focused that day.
Yeah.
And so, let me be a preacher on Sunday. And I'll be the leader of the organization, CEO type. I'll be that on Monday, and I'll even be it on Sunday night if I have to. But, Sunday morning, when I'm in the midst of pastoring, preaching, that is all my focus, loving on people, praying for people. Hey, my uncle's dying of cancer, Pastor, I need you to pray for me. I don't want to talk about spreadsheets and budgets when I'm doing that. It's just not that's a shift in my brain. I can make it, but I'm not as good. Once I make that shift, I'm not always as good coming back. I told Crystal one time, it was one Sunday I was preaching. It was a heavy message, and we had a scheduling conflict. That she came to me, and I was gonna have to make a decision one way or another, and somebody was gonna be frustrated, and my sermon was markedly worse in the second service because I talked about that mid service on Sunday morning, and I told her, I said, listen, just don't talk to me about it.
Yeah.
I said, just make the decision and we'll live with it later.
Yeah.
I said, because you took away from second service, and she didn't do it on purpose, and we all have those things happen, but it took away from my effectiveness in the second service, because all I was thinking about is, man, I'm going to piss somebody off today because I have to make this decision, and instead of, hey,
Right.
this is
Yes.
my message that I have to focus on right now.
So I feel like you've just spent the past 45 minutes really explaining to us that as leaders, we need to be prepared
Yeah.
to make the decisions, be ready and be willing to make the unpopular decision. And I would say make it in good time. Don't drag it out, and communicate why you're making the decision. Talk to them about the future and all of the good things and the way that this decision will benefit you or benefit the kingdom of God. And you really have to know your organization and know your people.
You have to, because if you don't know all of those things, you can't really make a decision. And the problem is with most leaders, we just want to say, well, I want to pray about it. And don't get me wrong, prayer is great. But God has all this information at your fingertips, that, he wants you to have, he wants you to pay attention to. He would tell his leaders and his prophets to look at the seasons, look at the time, look at this, look at that. And we just expect, I'll just go into my prayer closet and have all the answers. Well, I mean, sometimes he can do that, but he also expects you to do your work too. And I think sometimes as spiritual people, we just expect for God to do all the work for us instead of doing our homework as well. And I think that's where us as ministers sometimes miss the mark.
Well, and we do, but I would also say, I think for me, something that I walk through a lot is that my unpopular decision or my unpopular information comes from when someone comes to me for something and you say, Jesus painted this story to help them understand. And that can even be what I think some pastors don't realize. You're making unpopular decisions when someone comes to you with something and we hit them with scripture and we come back with what the Lord, but they wanted our opinion. And something that I'm learning right now is I have learned that they want to know my opinion more than they want to know what God says about it.
Right, yeah.
And so I have to navigate through that. And so now I'm in a position of, I need to be prepared so that I know how to frame my words to point them back to scripture. Sure. And ultimately that's what our decisions, I feel like that's what will happen is if we just keep pointing them back to the kingdom.
Yeah.
Those decisions they'll be more on board when they say, here comes a decision. I don't love this, but this is for God. That's who I'm serving.
And that's, I'd say as a pastor, probably the number one question I ask people is, well, what, you're asking me, but what is God saying to you?
Yeah.
And most people are like, I'm like,
I haven't asked him yet. I wanted to know what you said.
I'm like, well, you should probably
come back to me.
there.
Yeah. Start with him and let me come back to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Todd is not as important as God.
Yeah. Well, and people don't understand that. I think sometimes they supplement their pastors or the leadership at their church for that because they think that's the way that it's supposed to be.
True.
And it's our job to teach them. Yeah. Okay, Pastor Todd, well, thank you for your time, and we will see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Todd Barham Leadership Podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, press subscribe. If you're listening to us on any podcasting platform, you can rate and review us. That would really help out the show. We'll see you next time.